Um, cool. Okay, so thanks very much for joining me. I'm delighted to have Eric Burke, who is the Talent Acquisition Manager for Scraping Hub, join the call. So, hey, Eric, how are you?
Hi Claire, how are you doing?
Good,
Good to be
good.
here.
Good. Thanks very much for having you. So for those people that don't know, just as a quick introduction, so Scraping Hub is a global organization with over 100 plus fully remote developers working 100% remotely all of the time. So
Yeah,
I'm sure that is a challenge in itself. And the reason then I thought that today would be a good chance for us to have a chat is that it is extremely topical at the minute. And I'm sure you're being hit up for a lot of advice at the minute, are you?
absolutely. Yeah. So we're a fully remote working organization. We've 185 people across
Oh, wow.
28 different countries in the world. So it's for the size of company that we are, it's quite a large spread.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, we're fully remote. Have been from the very outset, at the very beginning in 2010 when the company was set up by Shane Evans and Pablo Hoffman, and the guys made a commitment then to be a remote working company as we scaled and as we grew. So we started this 10 years ago. So we're 10 years perfecting remote working, and it is our normal. So
Mm.
remote working is normal for us. And it's become normal for a lot more people over the last number of weeks. But it takes a lot of hard work to kind of get to, I suppose, the position that we're in when it
Mm.
comes to remote working. Yeah.
Definitely. And look, anyone that, as soon as we mention Scraping Hub, the first thing that they say is remote. So it is a strong name that you've built up for yourself on the market. But
Yeah.
one thing I want to touch on, because you've mentioned there that obviously Scraping Hub have been working remotely for 10 years now. So having moved from like a typical or a stereotypical office environment, will we say, with the bricks and the mortar, from moving from that type of environment into a fully remote position, what would you say was the biggest challenge for you personally?
Yeah, good question. Like uh, when before I even started with Scraping Up, I thought I understood remote working because I spent a lot of time kind of traveling between different locations, and so I never really had. There was never really one place that I called home, but I was always on the move, right?
Yeah.
So I thought I knew what remote working was on the back of that. Um, but no, I didn't. Right? It was remote working in terms of what the way we do it, um, allowing people to work from home or work from a coffee shop or work from a co-working space full time, all of the time, is different to kind of working kind of in multi locations, right?
Mhm.
Um, and what I found was the biggest challenge um, was the way we have to communicate. So the way we have to communicate with each other as colleagues, with my manager, with my team, all of that was kind of was different, and it took a bit of getting used to. So um, that was probably the big learning. The second one is to find a comfortable office space, right, and find what works for you. And absolutely critical. I mean, we can joke about it, and we've all seen political correspondents in North Korea on their video where their children are coming in behind them and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
That's reality, right? That's reality for remote working. That can happen, but be comfortable with it. But at least find a space that is yours and that you call your workspace, and that's where you go to then when you. So things like that, they were, to get used to that, and the immediacy of joining a remote working company, getting those things right, the comms and to be fair, when I joined Scraping Hub, there was. I mean, it was an unbelievably warm welcome, right? So people made me feel very much at home, and there was a lot of early engagement, um, which I've taken on board, and obviously as part of our hiring process, that's key in terms of the cultural nuances that means. Um, but they were the challenges. So comms and learning the tools that we use, the likes of Slack and Zoom and Google Hangouts and Trello and all these kind of the toolkit for remote working. Had to learn all those and pick those up and understand how to best utilize them by way of communicating effectively. So that's the big one. The office space is the other, and I think there was the need to be to ask lots of questions. So because you're kind of you're on your own at home, or you're somewhat isolated. You don't have colleagues working alongside you. You have to ensure you work hard at that to engage through the kind of toolkit, whether it's Zoom or otherwise, to ask lots of questions, and to make sure that you're fully briefed and fully informed on company strategy and various different things. Yeah,
definitely. And just on when you've mentioned the office environment there, I'm just admiring your beer garden in the background there. Looks very colourful and bright there, like you're on holiday. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too early in the morning now to be thinking beer, but yeah, it can double up as a beer garden in the afternoon.
Definitely, it's your way of switching off. So just in terms of your employees, and you'd mentioned that you have a number of people, as I said, working remotely at the minute. I imagine it'd be quite difficult to maintain your company culture and the values there. So is there anything that you're doing specifically in Scraping Hub that you feel helps in this particular regard?
Yeah. Wow. Company values and culture is really, it's apart from being currently very topical for us, it's a big consideration. We actually interview for our values. So we do a kind of a values-based interview with candidates as they come into the organization. So it's critical for us. And so ensuring that we have a good culture and getting that across the organization through remote working is difficult, and we work really, really hard at that. So the kind of things that we do, and I know other remote working companies would work hard at this kind of stuff. We ensure that we engage with colleagues and we bring them together in different kind of forums. So we have weekly, what we call shub talk. So anyone who joins Scraping Hub is referred to as a shubber, right? So then we kind of use that to refer to different things within the organization. But shub talks is your kind of TED talk type of scenario. We run those every Friday, and it's basically people coming and talking about things that they're passionate about, and it can be work related. It can be a kind of a topic that's quite prevalent at any point in time, or it can be a personal project, or it can be, for example, our team in Brazil got together and gave us a shop talk on the kind of they were effectively providing a travel guide for Brazil and the places to go and see, and why Brazil is such a beautiful country and so on. So you have these different kind of talks that we have every week, and then you could have somebody talking about their passion for mountain climbing. They could be talking about a technical product another week. We can talk about our values or something specific that might have occurred, or some kind of cause or champion that we're looking to discuss at any point in time. So we do that weekly, and then we have kind of water cooler events throughout the week as well, where people just hang out and talk about anything.
Yeah.
Literally anything. Some of the topics that come up would astound you. The kind of things
not to be repeated.
But it's just to be able to talk freely and openly with your colleagues, as you would if you were in an office environment and you were grabbing a glass of water. So we encourage that. And then we have so Shane, our CEO, does a regular kind of what we call coffee with the chief, and he literally, and you have to come with your coffee, right? You have to have your coffee and just chill and talk about anything, and that's kind of him being accessible to the rest of the organization.
Brilliant.
So we work hard at that kind of stuff, and that's important. And then we kind of get involved in we run different events throughout a given month, or like we did back in November time, we did move for Movember. So instead of growing mustaches, because I had already done that and wasn't willing to relinquish it. We got involved in as an organization. We all got moving in November, so we were doing 5K runs, or we were doing 5K walks, or kind of little jogs, or whatever you could manage, right? The intent being to do 60 kilometers, everyone to do 60 kilometers over the course of a month. So we kind of encourage that kind of activity, kick it off on a Zoom call, and then we record our activities through different kind of tools that are out there.
That's
Strava,
brilliant.
things like that.
Yeah, and I know that mental health and particularly focus on isolation for people who haven't worked remotely is a huge question that we're seeing quite a lot from a number of different people in the community here. So it's nice to hear that you've got those initiatives on the go at the minute, and you seem to be fairly clued in that regard, which is great. But one thing I just want to come back to as well, and it's something that I've seen quite a lot coming through from, say, a number of our clients or anyone that I'm speaking to at the minute, is, so obviously last week we had John Reardon from Spotify, who gave us some insight there into the remote working. But he mentioned that trust is a huge element when it comes to working with remote teams. So from your own experience, would you agree with this? And if so, is there anything that Scraping Hub do differently to highlight this trust?
Yeah, well, I think he's with Shopify as opposed to Spotify, unless he's gone off on the rock and roll.
Oh, sorry.
train. But
Typo on my end. Sorry.
No, you're right. Trust is huge, absolutely huge, because you are looking to bring people into your organization who are going to be working from home on their own without any kind of colleagues alongside. So you expect that they're going to get their work done. And while there's various kind of, all the tools are there anyway to understand whether people are kind of getting through their workload, but we typically, you've got to hire people who you can trust to do that. And so we do put a lot of emphasis on that. Even through our hiring process, we'd kind of ensure that we're assessing for that kind of stuff, and that people are kind of self-motivated, and that we can just let them do what they need to do. And you know what, you get it back tenfold. The productivity in organizations, in remote working organizations, I think is very high, and it is down to that kind of trust factor. So it's big, and it's a big thing for remote work, and it's big for organizations. I think I've heard a lot of that over the last number of weeks, where companies, as they kind of had to quickly move into this remote working environment, I keep reminding people when they ask me, is that, like, we're 10 years doing this, so and we're not perfect, right? So we're 10 years doing it, but so to be able to turn it around in kind of 5 to 6 weeks can be very, very difficult. But the foundation of trust, if you can trust your employees to do it, they will do it, and they'll give it back to you tenfold. So I think you have, and that's something that I know, the traditional organizations will have to adapt to, because it's very easy to come into the office at 9 o'clock and expect to see X number of colleagues sitting at their desks, and then you're keeping an eye on them. To go from that into an environment where you don't have that visibility, first of all, you have to trust that they're doing what you need them to do. And I think that's important. It's vitally important.
And I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to, if you've hired someone into the organization, you've trusted them in some respect. So just trust people to kind of do their job and get on with it. I know one thing that we do within our team is we have our stand-up scrum meetings in the morning, but instead of doing them at the scrum boards like we would normally do, we've taken it all online, which is very funny. So a lot of people don't realize that they're on mute half the time, or you could be, as you'd mentioned there, there could be kids in the background or whatever. But it's something you have to go with, and it's something everyone needs to be flexible with as well. So it's definitely a different experience, I'd say, on our end.
Very. I mean, kids and all that kind of stuff is like, we have family pets walking across the screen, walking on keyboards, cats and all sorts. So, and it's very funny because people will, they'll just work on. It's normal for them, right? So they just carry on, so that's, I suppose that's how that is the kind of the benefits really of remote working, that you have that kind of fluidity to your life, and your kind of your family life, and your the home is kind of going on around you. But yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah.
Definitely. And just one thing that you had mentioned earlier there as well is just that when you're interviewing people, that you'd mentioned that you sort of talk about the remote element and make sure people are comfortable with it. So if you're carrying out an interview process fully remote, I know that verbal and non-verbal cues can be very important. So when it comes to that remote interview, is there anything that you do differently in terms of process than what you would do, say, if you were interviewing someone in person?
Well, yeah, good question, Claire. Like we I suppose when we do an interview, it's like today, right? It's like preparing for a video call. You're not going through the process of going to an office location, sitting down in the lobby, waiting for somebody to come and pick you up, take you into the lift, bring you to the room, and then somebody else kind of 5 minutes later arrives into the room and starts the interview. You literally come to your laptop, you turn it on, and you're in the room. So you're immediately into the interview situation. So what we kind of encourage is, like in terms of the preparation from a candidate perspective, is that they give themselves plenty of time to prepare, be sitting at their desk, be comfortable, and have whatever kind of notes they may require around them. So be prepared and kind of go through that process, of even getting prepared, getting dressed for the interview, having their cup of coffee beforehand, and kind of going through that process so that they're sitting ready for the interview to kick off. And then once it kicks off, we certainly, it's a two-dimensional environment that we're in, so we do miss those kind of non-verbal cues. But we work hard, and so we kind of have to ask, kind of, base our interview around that. So we conduct a values-based interview. So we're talking to people about teamwork. We're talking to people about ambition. We're talking to them about their customer centricity, and they're open by default. So they would be our values. And then we assess for that, but we look for various different things in terms of their responses, and then the kind of external stuff, the kind of, are they involved in kind of teamwork? Do they like to work in projects? Do they like to get involved in like, it doesn't have to be sporting or anything like that. It can be, even outside of working, could be working on a particular tech project with a bunch of other people. But if, as opposed to being completely isolated or working in kind of individual capacity all the time. So we look for things like that. We look for, obviously you're looking for kind of presentation skills in kind of video environment, or communication skills. I tend to, you may have even noticed, I tend to use my hand a lot, right? So my hand appears suddenly in videos all the time. And
so I'm holding a pen to make sure I'm not doing the same.
but so you're kind of, you look at those kind of things, you just pick up on that, and whether or not, what does that say? It's just there's an engagement going on at the same time. So yeah, you look for those kind of things in the interview process. Yeah,
definitely. And one thing I would say that I find, now we work with a lot of international companies in our team, so I'm lucky that we would have had the experience of chatting back and forth with client meetings and that already on video. But when it came to chatting to my team, I found it quite different to be chatting to them on a video, and it was something I was very conscious of. And I don't know why, it's just something that was in my head. So do you find, does it take a while for people to get used to that when they start the organization, or are they generally comfortable when they come in?
Yeah, most people are comfortable enough with it, but there are some who, again, it's getting used to the toolkit that we would have, and it's things like, are you on mute? Should you be on mute? Do you turn your video off? Do you have your video on? All of those things. But even just as a way of working, getting used to kind of operating through video calls and video conferencing. It takes a bit of time, but for the most part, I think people get up to speed fairly quickly on that. And it's easy to do, so it's you're very much like, calendars are important. Working to your calendar is really important, and having your calendar, I suppose, fully prepared and up to date is kind of important.
Yeah.
But allowing some flexibility at the same time to kind of reach out to people on in between meetings and things like that is also kind of important. But the tools are there to really engage through video as required.
Okay.
So a lot of the times, like, we use Zoom actually as a kind of as our soft phone, but it's as easy to do a video call as it is just a regular call. So I find, and this is perhaps a personal choice, but I find everything defaults to a video call. I prefer to kind of see people when I'm talking to them, as opposed to just on a phone call. And
yeah.
that's kind of blended into my personal life, where I prefer to see my friends if I'm calling them, and it's easier to do it now than it would have ever before. So
I think by the end of this, everybody's going to be a master of the video calls, between all of the pub quizzes and the drinking sessions and everything. It's happening on videos now. So I think it is very much moving it into a way of life. And as you said, like, even my default would have probably been to pick up a phone to someone, whereas now I will call them on Teams, I'll use Interview, I'll use different platforms, and it's just, I think it is, as much as people don't like the term, it is the new normal, and it's just something that we'll evolve with. I mean, I don't think people liked using the phone to start with, but then people got used to it. But just moving on then to leadership. So leadership's obviously something that's very important in any company, whether it's a remote or a traditional office then. So what would you see as the main difference between remote and in-person leadership?
So I think with remote leadership, you gotta, in fact, you're probably more accessible than if you are kind of on-prem leadership, if you want to put it that way. Because typically it is a case of Zoom calls, video calls, and so on and so forth. I think leaders, certainly in Scraping Hub, leaders are very accessible and very accommodating and extremely collaborative. So there's a great the style of communication for leadership is very important. So we work really hard at ensuring that the whole organization is aware of the vision and the goals that are set for the company, and those company goals then cascade down through each team. So that effort and communication we work really hard at, and that's because we're already in the zone of working to ensure that our communications are effective and are getting to the whole team across 28 different countries, right? So we work really hard at that, and as a result, that's the type of leadership that we have, a very collaborative, very open leadership, and yeah, so that works for us. I think I know there are other remote companies that would have similar approaches, because it's the kind of style that suits remote. But there are others then that will have variations on that theme. But it works effectively for us. So really, we're going through a great process at the moment around the company goals and how they feed into each team's goals and each individual with each team. So the communication is really important, and the openness of our leaders is key.
Brilliant. And then, look, I know at the minute we'd mentioned earlier there that a lot of companies have been forced into implementing remote working practices a lot faster than what they maybe are comfortable with. And I know the Scraping Hub, obviously, as you mentioned there, have been doing it for the last 10 years. So just to kind of wrap it up then, so what would be your top 3 tips then for anyone who is managing a team remotely?
Yeah, communication. It's key in
For
terms
all
of
three.
saying. Yeah, for also it's the most. It's like, okay, so there's that. I probably mentioned this almost subliminally throughout all of the questions this morning, Claire. But communications and ensuring that you're communicating with your team is important, and that they're getting the message. So, and to encourage the team and members to say, no, I don't get that message. What, can you repeat it, or can you kind of communicate it differently to me? So not to be afraid that the message, to ensure that the message gets across. So, and not to be afraid of repeated questions to ensure that it is clear. So communicate effectively is the big one. I think making sure that your team are and I don't know, we may not have referred to this much this morning, but their well-being, their physical well-being is important, and their mental well-being is critically important. So looking after your team's well-being, ensuring that they're, the one thing that you do find with remote working is that it can be very easy to work because it's just easy, right? You can get up in the morning and you can be working very, very quickly, and you don't have to consider the commute to work and the commute from work. So you get a lot more work done, but sometimes, all the time, you need to ensure they switch off.
Yes,
they
it's the
turn
taking
off,
the adequate breaks. Yeah.
Taking the right breaks and taking the right holidays, and making sure they're getting holidays and taking the holidays, and just making, as much as you possibly can to encourage physical exercise and getting up and getting out, whether you do that first thing in the morning, kind of as a routine of going to work, or at the end of the day, that you're kind of recognizing the need to switch off and stop work and have a process that allows you to do that. So I would encourage that, and look out for kind of employee well-being, and be very mindful of all of those kind of initiatives that are needed. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look,
that's and the last tip, Claire, is as I started, that make sure that you have a comfortable workspace and a comfortable work environment, that it's bright. And it's I mean, today it's a nice bright day for where I am, but we work in the winter as well, right? So it's never always bright, but ensure you've got a bright workspace, and a kind of a comfortable environment that you're working in. Listen, there's many others, right? But they'd be the key ones from my perspective. Come back to me tomorrow and I might give you another 3.
Just on the brightness, I'm loving your daughter's handiwork on the back wall there. So that's fantastic. Anything you can do to make it a bit more comfortable at home.
Yeah, she got bored last week and she decided to paint the wall in a kind of a rainbow color. Yeah,
idle hands and all that.
It does get noticed a lot in interviews. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. Thanks very much for taking the time, and I'm sure our audience will find this extremely helpful.
Super stuff.
Thanks very much. I'll chat to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. Mind yourself. Take care. Bye-bye.